United States alone, there are around 20 people physically abused in an intimate relationship every minute, as stated by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, also known as the NCADV. Based on this statistic, you or someone you know could be abused, and it is important to know the signs and what to do if this abuse happens to you. I have been researching this topic for over a week, and I personally have family members who have and still are affected by this type of abuse. Domestic violence is one of many traumatizing types of abuse. In this speech, we will learn what domestic violence is, how it affects the victim, and how to prevent this trauma. First, we need to ask, what is domestic violence? According to the NCADV, domestic violence is any willful, abusive behavior as an effort to maintain power and control over an intimate partner. Abusive behavior includes physical, sexual, psychological, and emotional violence. Although physical is the most common type of domestic violence, other abusive behaviors are just as traumatizing. Domestic abuse can happen to anyone, no matter your age, race, or gender. The frequency and severity can vary dramatically, ranging from one episode to years of traumatic abuse. On average, women between ages 18 and 24 are most commonly affected by domestic abuse. This means that abuse will start early and continue throughout a lifespan. Often an abuser can deceive the victim initially, but then gradually get more aggressive as a relationship continues. After learning what domestic violence is, we can ascertain what a victim goes through, both mentally and physically. Mentally, the abuser belittles the victim. Depression and suicidal behavior are major effects of domestic violence. One study done by the CDC concluded that women who have survived domestic abuse are 3 times more likely to develop a depressive disorder than women who have not been affected by this abuse. Statistics discovered by the National Center of Domestic Violence state that women have a higher chance of being affected physically when in these abusive relationships. While abused, their chances of contracting HIVs or other STIs increased dramatically resulted from rape. Women also have a higher chance of unwanted pregnancy, which commonly leads to miscarriage, stillbirth, malnutrition, and PTSD. Although women may be more likely to be affected physically, men are affected too. Both men and women in abusive relationships have a higher chance for chronic illnesses including broken bones, respiratory conditions, muscle disorders, and in severe cases, death. Now that we know how domestic violence affects the victim, let's learn how to prevent this abuse. To try and stop domestic abuse from happening in the first place, we need to start at a young age. One approach in the prevention strategy created by the CDC suggests that we improve environmental climate and safety. Another strategy is to educate kids at a young age about healthy relationships. More than 6% of children are exposed to domestic violence. Based on this statistic, simply having a healthy relationship as a parent can contribute to the prevention of domestic abuse. When trying to avoid abusive relationships, it is important to recognize the signs. The most common tendencies an abuser will display include apologizing profusely, stating that the abuse is out of love, and most commonly, disconnecting the victim from friends and family. When relationships begin, these tendencies can seem harmless. However, they will escalate with time. This leads to the dismissal of abusive behavior. Whenever you notice any of these signs, you should get out of the relationship immediately, no matter how minor they may seem. If you feel there is no way out of a relationship, contact the domestic violence hotline. On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to this hotline nationwide, according to the NCADV. After summing up what it takes to prevent and avoid abusive relationships, we now know we can all help contribute to the prevention of domestic violence. To conclude, domestic violence is one of many traumatizing types of abuse. Now you know what domestic violence is, the effects the victim goes through, and how to prevent this abuse from happening. After learning about domestic abuse and the trauma it causes the victim, we can teach each other to prevent and avoid these types of relationships, and hopefully, these horrifying statistics decrease.